complaining.
Yeah, that's it. True enough.
Okay, Gary, well, we are at 10 o'clock, so if you're ready, I'm going to get started.
Thanks, Andrea.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name's Andrea Rowe from Safety Action, and today our Friday monthly webinar, Friday the 11th of February. We're going to give you a safety update, and I've got Gary Rowe here as well that's going to talk with you this morning. We do, just let you know, we do record the webinar for those that miss out. So the webinar will go up on the website later on. So if you like, you can leave your camera on or off, however is your preference, but just know we do record it, so we might see you there. If you could please put your speakers onto mute. And feel free to use the chat box if you have any questions at any time during the webinar, but we'll also give you a chance to ask questions at the end. Thank you. So hopefully you can all see the screen here. So welcome. And today we're going to tell you about an article that featured in our February Safety Action newsletter. If you didn't subscribe already to the newsletter, there is a link to the February news in the chat box. And be sure to go to our website or let us know if you'd like to subscribe to the newsletter if you don't already. Gary's going to tell you what the difference is between a safety spotter and a safety observer, and also about how you driver medical fitness, in particular for heavy vehicle drivers, and whose responsibility that is to ensure. I'm going to tell you about some recent changes to the COVID-19 WorkSafe notification requirements. Gary's going to tell you about our latest legislative update and any key changes to the laws that you need to know about. And we will share some of the key findings from our recent safety benchmarking survey. So Gary, can you tell us the difference between a safety spotter and a safety observer?
Thanks, Andrea. Welcome everyone once again to our monthly update briefing. Good to see so many familiar faces and familiar names on our attendance list today. Okay, being Friday, end of the week, we like to keep it a bit lighthearted. You know, we'll only take about 20 minutes, half hour for our briefing. We like to just bring you the highlights to keep you informed in terms of workplace health and safety issues. So we find that the term safety spotter and safety observer are used interchangeably in industry. And typically you'll find this around mobile plant and equipment, and somebody in a high visibility vest is giving directions or support to the operator of the vehicle to guide them safely around. That could be unloading trucks, could be out around power lines, could be out on a construction site, could be anywhere. So that's what the person is doing. So who is a safety spotter and who is a safety observer? Those who know me well know that I always like to go back to, we use the idea of the legislative pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid is the safety law. So I actually first look for, are there any regulations that actually prescribe and detail who these people are and what their roles are? Or are we allowed to use these terms interchangeably? Are they fluid? So what I can tell you is that there are no safety regulations directing the terminology of safety observer and safety spotter. However, I did find under a Victorian Code of Practice, which was around elevated work platforms, where WorkSafe Victoria assigned two different terms. And I think it's probably helpful to use those, but I'll show a slight variation of that in a moment. So under the WorkSafe guidance, they refer to a safety observer is a person who helps direct mobile plant, including loading and unloading, transport, etc., but not near power lines. So a safety observer is providing general direction, loading, unloading, moving vehicles around to keep them clear of pedestrians or other obstructions. So they defined a safety spotter is a specially trained and certified person who guides plant operators in proximity of overhead power lines. So now we've got two different things. To be a safety spotter and direct any plant in the proximity of electrical power lines, you need special training and certification for you to be certified to actually perform that task. So as long as you're not near power lines, we'll accept that this is a general role, a safety observer, and no specific training or qualifications are mandated or required. However, it may be appropriate in your business, if you're going to have people doing this job regularly or in important locations, that you could have internal training, for example, for those people. However, to avoid confusion, because I think I would keep mixing up, is that a safety observer or a safety spotter? I suggest we add the word electrical to the front of spotter. We just say electrical spotter, or we've got a safety observer. That way you'll always know the electrical spotter is for electrical application. Safety observer is just helping moving plant. So just one small thing. So I think picking up that point of electrical spotter, safety observer, and the electrical spotter needs specific training. So thank you for that. I'd just like to move on to my next topic, if I may, that Andrea mentioned, and it's around driver medical fitness. And it actually comes from an article from the Bus Safety News, which is a Victorian government great publication, provides lots of good information, both around transport and in particular on buses. And so the question was, who's responsible to make sure the driver's medical fitness is appropriate and current? And now I don't think there's any great surprises here, but let's work through it just so that we're clear. Historically, all the road laws in Australia have focused on enforcement of the laws with the driver on the road. Whether you and I in a car or a truck driver, and if a truck driver's speeding in a truck, or if a truck driver historically had an overloaded truck, then the police would pull the truck driver over and prosecute or fine the truck driver only. That's it. So traditionally, our laws have focused on the driver of whatever vehicle it is. So some years ago, Australia introduced national laws, road laws around every state of Australia, called chain of responsibility. You've probably heard about this. So chain of responsibility. So this covers heavy vehicles, not your car or mine. So heavy vehicles typically greater than 4.5 tonnes gross weight. That's what's defined as a heavy vehicle. There are some other categories as well, oversized vehicles, excavators and unusual vehicles. But essentially all you and I need to remember, heavy vehicles, typically trucks and buses. So they're going to be over 4.5 tonne. So what the chain of responsibility laws have done, have introduced duties for everyone in the logistics chain. I call it logistics chain because if it's warehousing, moving of goods and materials for companies, that's definitely called the logistics chain. But for you and I, the logistics chain is, even if it's a bus or some other individual delivery of a truck, the logistics is you are taking a vehicle from point X to point Y. You may be carrying people or you may be carrying particular loads. So the employer who employs people to perform any task, to drive a truck, operate a warehouse, load vehicles, unload vehicles, there'll be employees of those people. Employees have duties. Those who plan or schedule heavy vehicle movements, so all buses will have schedules. So for example, they're to ensure the schedules are not so tight that drivers would be encouraged or forced to speed in order to meet the schedule. So this is what the chain of responsibility laws was designed to pick up, not to put pressure or undue force on drivers of heavy vehicles to break the laws, not to encourage drivers to overload their vehicle to have fewer loads or to get inducements to get more money. So if you only paid on how much they put on the truck, but it's only a 10-tonne truck, you can't induce them to put 12-tonne on a load. So the chain of responsibility laws are quite wide-ranging. So those who load or unload trucks, so particularly those who load a truck, if the truck is unsafe, and you can clearly see this, it should not be loaded. If the load you've got to put on exceeds the load capacity of that vehicle, then it should not be put on. If once a load is on, it's got to be properly restrained. So the driver has the prime role for that. However, the loaders need to point that out to a driver and say, please don't leave the site until this is restrained. And those who consign, the consignees or consignors, these are who make arrangements either to send goods out or to receive them. It'll be the consignee or the consignors of loads have a duty as well. And that prime duty is not to have inducements for any breach of the road safety laws, and particularly as it may put pressure on a driver. So now let's come to the question in hand, the driver's medical fitness. So the driver needs to comply with personal requirements. So they are still duty bound not to speed on the road, still duty bound not to take an overloaded vehicle or unsafe vehicle onto the road, etc. And this would include being properly licensed and have appropriate medical certificates as required to perform that function. So the drivers will have that. That will still be enforced by police and Vic Roads and road authorities on the road in particular. But under the chain of responsibility, the employer can't simply say, oh, well, the driver was not licensed or his medical had expired or whatever. So the the employers need to put in a system in place to actually cite and record records for all their drivers of heavy vehicles, that they're appropriately licensed, have the appropriate medical certificates and that they're current, and to understand when they'll expire. So the simple question is simply reinforcing this wide-ranging chain of responsibility. So the medical fitness is no different to duty. I could have had the question, does he have a current driver's license? It could have been the same question, and there could have been some other things as well. So it's really about chain of responsibility. It's now a shared responsibility, and it's not just the police picking up drivers on the road. That's somewhat unfair. They've been put under a lot of pressure, particularly in the past, and these laws are designed to make sure that everyone else involved in that logistics process of putting heavy vehicles on the road have a duty. They should know their duty and make sure they're not exceeding it. So if any of you listeners have heavy vehicles bringing loads and supplies to your factories or your facilities, or you are sending materials out or product out, or if you've got deliveries using heavy vehicles, then just be aware, chain of responsibility could impact on you, your managers, anyone who receives those goods and services, anyone who sends things out. If you need to know more, you can contact us at Safety Action. We actually have a nice little half-day training session for key people like warehouse people, logistics and forklift drivers in particular, that might be helpful for you and your team if you have the need in this area. So that's who is responsible for driver medical fitness. I think you've now got a good feel for that. Thanks for that, Andrea.
Thank you, Gary, and that's very informative. Now, something else everyone needs to know is about some changes to COVID reporting and incident notification reporting. So first up, there's a proposed change to the definition of a notifiable incident in Victoria. This changed definition potentially broadens what makes up a notifiable incident. And so it may include, for example, potential exposures to infectious diseases or health hazards, but also make other dangerous occurrences. We believe the scope may be broadened. So we're just waiting on the passing of that bill and with the more detailed definitions to be released by WorkSafe. We'll keep you updated on that one. And now also last month, New South Wales and Victoria removed some COVID notification requirements. So it's now no longer required to notify the regulator if a worker attends the workplace while they were potentially infectious. However, if a worker contracts COVID-19 at work and their illness does become severe, that it becomes to the extent of another type of notifiable incident, whereby if they die or need to be hospitalised, then that does become a notifiable incident. Those changes are similar in both Victoria and New South Wales. Throughout last year, we are aware many businesses had to defer certain safety activities that are typically conducted on site. Some of these included their routine safety audits, both internal and external, and some safety related training. We just remind you as you update your training plans and your safety business plans for the year, that, you know, if you did miss out on conducting these activities, it's a good time to start planning for those to recommence this year. We will talk next month in our newsletter more about strategic safety planning and preparing a safety business plan. So feel free to reach out if you need support in preparing your plans for these activities. Now, next, Gary is going to tell you about some of the highlights from our quarterly legislative update. Over to you, Gary.
Thanks, Andrea. We have a legislative update service, and I'm not sure all of our good friends are aware of this, but I just thought I'd briefly outline our Q1, quarter 1, 2022 report that we've just released to our retainer clients. They've got the full report, but I thought we'd share with you this morning in our monthly update the key things. This might be very interesting and valuable for you. Number one, Victoria has introduced into Parliament a bill to prohibit OHS insurance or indemnities. So if you're not familiar with this, you need to alert your executive team, just so they understand as part of their insurance portfolio that moving forward and as part of your risk register, that if executives thought we will have insurance in case we get an OHS prosecution or fine, it will be illegal to seek insurance, to offer insurance or indemnities to any person or parties in relation to workplace safety breaches. Now, you may have thought this had already been banned because under the WHS legislation in most jurisdictions around Australia, it has long been illegal to offer or seek indemnities for safety breaches. But Victoria's coming to the party under our separate OHS legislation in Victoria. So we're just letting you know this is the bill. We'll let you know when that bill has been passed. That will then become obviously law. So this is coming up in the very near future. We've been waiting for many years for WA, who are a bit of an island, not only because of the border closures, because of COVID, but they've had their own strange, but in many places very good safety laws, which are very different to the WHS harmonised laws around Australia and very different to the Victorian OHS laws. So they've had a lot of great regulations on topics not regulated in every other state. So they've been very peculiar. But they're coming on board with the harmonised WHS Act and regulations. Of course, like every state, they have tweaked it and have certain things under their laws that the other states don't have. So many months ago, they passed the Act, the WHS Act, Harmonised Act, but it has not taken force until the regs were available. So they've now released the regulations, the draft regs, and we expect now that once they receive feedback on that from industry, it's expected there will not be much change, that we would expect WA, Western Australia, to have harmonised WHS laws in effect probably coming into effect this year, maybe late this year. We don't know the timing. If somebody else knows the timing, you can let me know, but that's all we know at this stage. So the draft WHS regs are out for WA. They have some tweaks which are different to the harmonised laws around Australia. Now, ACT, obviously Canberra, has passed industrial manslaughter laws. Victoria has it already, New South Wales has it, Queensland has it, a variety of other states either have it or are in the process of introducing it. So here's ACT is the next jurisdiction to come on board with industrial manslaughter laws. They've been passed. We don't have the commencement date yet. We will update you. Northern Territory have put out a bulletin on crush injuries, and some of these involved something as simple as gates, where people have got their hand caught in large gates, where they be sliding gates or hinged gates. So just something to watch out for. That bulletin's available if anyone has a particular interest or need for that. SWA stands for Safe Work Australia, which is the overarching body for safety in Australia, but it doesn't have legislative effect. So it's an advisory body that puts out guidance and codes of practice, but we can use that in every jurisdiction. So it's really good national guidance for what we can and should be doing. They've put out some further guidance on COVID and workers. However, you and I know the specific regulations that apply in each state. Andrea's outlined some of those. There's just recent changes for Victoria and New South Wales will take precedence over SWA guidance. But where there are gaps in those laws, the SWA guidance is great. So there you go. Safe Work Australia has also put out recent guidance on elevating platforms. However, New South Wales, Victoria, and virtually every other jurisdiction also has their own guidelines or handbooks on elevating platforms. So it won't be unique, but it could be another good guide, might have some aspects of interest or value for you. Many of our friends and clients, particularly those in the agricultural sector or maybe in recreational pursuits, are familiar with and or use quad bikes. Quad bikes continue to feature with serious accidents, particularly in the workplace on farms as well as recreational. So WA have reduced their quad bike guidelines. There's separately legislation continuing to be introduced. So as of recent times, of October of last year, no one can sell a quad bike now in Australia that doesn't have OPDs, Operator Protection Device. This is not full rollover protection with seatbelts. OPDs, Operator Protection Device, looks like a rollover bar, but the operator still is not in a seatbelt nor fully enclosed. So it's a one small step towards giving better protection for quad bike operators, but not full rollover protection. So for example, if you're not in a seatbelt and the bike rolls over, even with what you think is a rollover bar, you still get thrown out and the vehicle can still land on you, and it could well be the rollover bar that injures you. So just so that you're aware, Australia is moving step by step to safer off-road vehicles, because essentially quad bikes are off-road, either recreational, farms, works, that type of thing, but we're not at full protection. So if you're worried about your team and you have off-road, side-by-side vehicles, full rollover protection and seatbelts offer safer off-road vehicles. And the statistics show even motorbikes are safer than quad bikes. Isn't that interesting? So even motorbikes, two-wheeled, you can fall off. Typically, though, the operator falls off and may break their arm, sprain their shoulder or whatever. But on a quad bike, quad bikes can be 300 kilograms in weight. They roll on, the operator can crush them or suffocate them. So quad bikes being bigger and heavier pose a bigger risk when that rollover occurs. So that's that bit. South Australia has got some new labelling requirements for LPG cylinders. And just briefly, New Zealand has put out some guidance on contractor management and, interestingly, job planning. So part of their statistics have shown that accidents and incidents are happening because of poor planning of contractor works. So this is providing some interesting guidance on what you and I might look at in terms of planning jobs when we're involving contractors. So they're starting to introduce a duty of better planning with contractors. So that's pretty well it for the legislative update, the highlights. If you're interested in this service, just contact anyone at Safety Action and we can give you a quote as part of a safety retainer service where we can get any sort of inquiries, safety questions, inquiries answered very quickly, get the legislative update, also get a number of other safety bulletins and fact sheets throughout the year as well. So thank you for that, Andrea. What I'd like to talk about next is our safety benchmarking survey. We were in the past, prior to COVID, running this annually. Since COVID and during COVID, many of our good friends and clients struggled to get us the data. So they were having trouble getting their staff in, getting data. We've decided to move this to 2 yearly now. So our current 2022 report, which I'm about to briefly explain the highlights, we won't run again now until 2024 report. We won't run it next year. So this is quite valuable information. It's not going to come out every year now. And as best as we can tell, no one else is benchmarking this in Australia. And we don't even know internationally of anyone doing similar. So number one, what are the most effective safety initiatives you can implement in your business right now? And this is not based on Gary Rowe's opinion, but in fact, our benchmarking survey showed the businesses that actually did these things performed better than those who did not. So that's all we can tell you. The survey included over 25,000 employees and about 50 million hours of exposure, work hours. So this is not a small database. It's not the biggest, but it's a reasonable database to tell us. So the businesses that had a clear 5 or 10 year safety vision and plan, this is number one, by the way, this was the top one. If you do this, you're more likely to perform better in all other parameters of safety performance. So think of a 5 or 10 year safety vision and safety plan. Have a key risks register, key safety risks register. Those who have this and focus on those things perform better. And those who have something like 3 yearly independent audits, because you should be doing internal audits, of course, in your own business. But those who do typically about every 3 years, independent, perform better than those who don't. So they were the top three. They stood out head and shoulders above other safety initiatives. So I thought you might be interested in that. Other helpful initiatives that weren't quite as effective but did help was a legislative compliance register. Those who had that performed better. Those who had trained their staff in how to conduct risk assessments. Almost every business we work with says, oh, our team have to do a risk assessment. But if you haven't trained the team to do that, and therefore they don't do it effectively, it doesn't deliver the results that you may want and hope. Those who not only do a safety climate survey, maybe every couple of years or so, is fine, but those who actually make sure that results of that survey is reported to the board perform better. Clearly now the board has an interest. They can see what you're doing. They can see where the strengths and weaknesses are. Those businesses that do annual internal audits, your own safety team and personnel should audit your own safety program annually. You should only need experts or specialists to do that periodically, as we've said, maybe 3 yearly. And the other one our survey found was having formal safety qualifications for your safety specialists. Those businesses perform better than only some in-house training. So there's the highlights. And Andrea, if I can just have the next page, just a table briefly before I finish off. So this is a table trending from 2013 through to 2021. Our data for this year's report ran up to 2021 last year. You can see the areas are green that are slightly improved. Interestingly, the only one that actually went backwards was number of days lost per 100 employees. Whether COVID has had any impact on this, that you haven't been, if somebody was injured at work, we didn't able to make face-to-face contact meetings with people, and we were less effective at return to work, I'm not sure, but that's the only one that significantly, as it was one of our key lag indicators that went up. The other one we monitor out of interest is how many safety people your business has got per 100 employees. because some people say we've got 2 safety people. Have I got too many or too few? Or we've got 1, or we've got half a person working on safety. There's no legislative answer to this. We can tell you over the years, and depends on whether you're a high risk industry, geographically spread, or all condensed low risk in an office. On average, it's about half a person per 100 employees. So therefore, if you had 200 employees, you would have 1 full-time safety person on average. I can tell you, geographically spread, higher risk like electrical industry would probably have as much as 2 or over 2 people per 100. So I've just shown you the spread. So only the participants of our benchmarking surveys get the full report. I've shared with you today the highlights. If you did not, if you participated, you should already have your report. If you haven't, let us know. If you're interested in more, we would like you to participate in the next survey. If you contact our office in the meantime, we'll consider whether we can take your data retrospectively and get you the full report. But remember, to be fair, those who actually put themselves out in difficult times during COVID and got us the data have the full report on this. So I thought that you might find that of interest. So that's all I've got today, Andrea, and back to you to wrap up our session.
Thanks, Gary, and well done to Katie and Steve in our team that thought of those interesting questions to ask in this year's survey. We always do ask more interesting questions and analyze that data to get us some really interesting findings that I believe are really useful. Now, for those of you in Victoria, we are really excited to be announcing our first safety briefing, our breakfast briefing that we haven't had in quite a while. We are having one, we have scheduled one for just before Easter on Tuesday, the 5th of April at our conference room at Safety Action in Clayton. We start at 7:30 in the morning for some presentations, and we stop at 9 o'clock for those of you that need to get back to another office or elsewhere. The topic will be strategic planning and safety planning for 2022. So in our March newsletter and our website, we'll have more information about how you can book into the free breakfast briefing. So we're really looking forward to seeing you if you can come along. Now, in next month's webinar, we will be talking about strategic safety planning versus safety business plans. So make sure you tune in on Friday, the 11th of March for that one. And also look out for our update on boating safety. Now, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask or add in a comment in there. Otherwise, we thank everyone for joining us today and thanks for your support. So have a wonderful day and weekend.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great weekend as well. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Andrea. Thank you, Gary.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dorinda.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Gina, for your comments.